relationship specialist. I'd like to welcome you to Love, Listen, Talk, Repeat, a podcast that talks all about relationships. They come in all shapes and sizes, and each one's unique. So in this podcast, I chat with guests about life events and issues that can affect relationships, as well as discussing different types of relationships that may not always fit the mould of being mainstream. There will also be some episodes where it's just me talking about something that may be helpful in your relationship. So for now, just sit back and enjoy. Hi, it's Wendy, and today I'm going to be talking to Amy Stammers. She's a mindset and self-care coach, and her business is the Teapot. Refilling the lives of Aspergers wives. Now, this can sound quite intriguing because at first, kind of when you first hear it, you think, what's that about? So, Amy, please introduce yourself and tell us all what this is all about.
Hi, Wendy. Yeah, I'm Amy, and I set up the Teapot about a year ago because I am a wife to a man who was diagnosed with Aspergers Syndrome 2 years ago now. And last year, I just felt that I needed a forum in which I could be understood and where I could share the trials and tribulations and positive things about my relationship, my neurodiverse relationship. And there wasn't really anything specifically for UK women. There's lots of online forums and groups out there, but they're quite American. And the American system and kind of treatment of autism is very, very different to how we perceive and treat autism in the UK. So I set up the Teapot, which started off as a Facebook support group. And women just came flooding into the group because it was UK specific and because I made it a positive space. I didn't really want any negative ranting and raving because that doesn't build anyone up. I wanted a space where we could build each other up, help each other, support each other, have a laugh together about some of the things that we experience every day, but not in a nasty way, just in an understanding way. And it just really grew. And as the online Facebook group grew, I realised that actually these women were needing more support. So I looked into doing coaching, life coaching, specifically to help myself and the women in the Teapot to just focus more on themselves and yeah, just to feel better about their lives in their neurodiverse relationship.
That sounds great, and what a lovely thing to do, because I'm sure there are lots of people out there that are in relationships and they just don't get it. They struggle to understand their partner's issues and struggle to cope at times. And yes, to have a laugh about it in a nice way, to actually joke about those things, I think is, and find joy in it, because I think that's really important, to find the lighter side of things and actually be able to share it with like-minded people. That's such a lovely thing to do. Really nice. So I know you're like a busy mum of two. You've got a thriving online support group and business, as you said. And just thinking, what's so busy that although life looks so rosy on the outside, you've experienced what it's like to be at the breaking point in your relationship, as I'm sure lots of people have. But can you tell us more about that? When was that? Was that when your husband was diagnosed, or before then, or is I'm really curious about that. So I'm sure everybody else is.
Well, it kind of built up over a number of years. I suppose the point at which things really changed was as soon as I fell pregnant with our second child. It was like a switch was flicked.
Oh.
And my husband just kind of shut down and he couldn't cope. The pregnancy was very planned, but yeah, it just seemed to really knock him for six. And it was quite difficult for me as well, because I was working full time and our 2-year-old son was in nursery full time and my husband was working. And I had quite a bad pregnancy. I suffered quite bad morning sickness, well, all day sickness in the first few months. And then I suffered severe pelvic girdle pain and I was on crutches by 20 weeks pregnant.
Gosh.
So, and I was working full time and looking after our 2-year-old son. And my husband was just completely unavailable, both physically and emotionally. There was one instance when our son fell ill at nursery, and because I was teaching, I couldn't have my phone turned on during lessons. So my husband was the first contact. So his mobile phone, he had 2 mobile phones and his landline phone at work.
Right.
And nursery couldn't get hold of him. So at the end of the school day, I had 3 missed calls from nursery saying that my son needed collecting and that they couldn't get hold of my husband. So I ended up having to leave school, go and pick up my son. Now, because I was on crutches, it was really difficult. I couldn't lift my son into the car. I couldn't carry him out. He was really poorly, really lethargic. And so somebody from the nursery had to actually bring him out to the car, strapping into his car seat. So, and then I struggled to get him into the house, and he just fell asleep on the sofa. Anyway, I kept trying to get hold of my husband. Couldn't get hold of him at all. Just went through to voicemail, and he didn't come home at the normal time. It's just like, where on earth is my husband? He hadn't thought to communicate what he was doing. And I just had to stay up. It was and leave my poorly son on the sofa until my husband came home. He had gone out for an impromptu drinks evening with colleagues, and he hadn't bothered to tell me. And so he rolled in about 11 o'clock. And I was just furious because I'd really struggled and I was tired and my son was poorly, and he just didn't seem bothered. He couldn't see why I was so upset. And being pregnant, I just wondered if he'd even be around for the birth of our daughter. I just felt so alone. I felt let down, unsupported. I was so frustrated. The fact that he just showed no concern for anyone but himself. It was like he was completely blinkered. Nothing else mattered apart from him. He was in his own little world. Another example, he'll cook a meal, but to his tastes. He forgets or doesn't even acknowledge the fact that I've got food intolerances and the children are really fussy eaters. And then the real tipping point was just after Christmas last year, so around February 2017. I was away for the weekend, and he said, "Oh, I'm going to tidy up the bedroom." It's like, okay, good. He hoards paperwork and receipts. So I said, okay, yeah, you tidy up the paperwork then. so then we can get into bed easier. And he ended up just concentrating on my paperwork, and he completely emptied my memory box and threw all my stuff away. So I had photos, I had letters from my grandparents, I had programs from concerts and plays that I'd been in, all gone. I
Oh,
was livid and so hurt and upset. And yet he just didn't realise that anything was wrong. He didn't see why I was upset. He said, well, I've sorted out the paperwork.
goodness me. I can't imagine what that felt like for you.
Yeah. And it's so, and there's lots of little things like that. It's just infuriating, the fact that he cannot see anything from other people's point of view. It's his way or the highway, basically.
Oh, right.
And the lack of communication is yeah, it's a really big issue. And it's just like living with a sulky housemate, basically.
Oh, Amy. That must be really tough, because I can't imagine living with anybody who's sulky. I mean, it would just be really testing my patience no end, I have to say. So when you met your husband, did he have Asperger's then, or has it developed? I'm curious about that.
Well, he's always been introverted.
Right.
And he's always been considered a bit of an eccentric.
Okay.
And he's found relationships very difficult in the past. I was really his first serious girlfriend, and he was late 30s when we met. And we went for pre-marriage counselling because we were having a few issues. And unbeknown to us, the counsellor was actually a specialist in Aspergers Syndrome, because her husband had been diagnosed kind of in midlife. And we got talking about my husband's family, and got talking about my husband and some of the things that he did. And the counsellor just said, have you considered that you might have Asperger's? And so she gave us some literature, and I read it, and I said, oh my gosh, this is my husband down to a T. So yeah, so many questions were answered, and it actually helped my husband to realise why he was like he was, and it really helped him to actually gain a better sense of identity. But we just left it there until later on, when things got really bad. So
Right. So you're saying that they've become increasingly more difficult.
yeah.
That's tough, because I guess when you first hear of any kind of situation like that, whether someone's got a condition, you're madly in love with someone, and you just think, oh, we can get through this, it'll be fine, and yeah, and it doesn't seem that bad to start with. It's just, as you say, when situations like you're pregnant and your son's ill and you're on crutches and you can't get hold of him, or losing your memory box, that's all those kinds of things are really, they're tough, aren't they? Because they're special, very difficult moments in the first case, but the second one, your memory box, you can't bring that back. So I wonder, do you end up feeling resentful?
Yeah, quite a bit actually, but I have to think he can't help it.
No.
That's just the way his brain is wired, and I really have to think about how I react emotionally to the things that he does.
Yes, and I think that is important for any of us, whatever situation we're in, is to be aware of how we react to other people, because we can't change them, but we can change our responses. So I think there's something very valuable in that, in anybody's life, but certainly with somebody who's got that condition. Yeah. Wow. So how have you got support? Where did you go for support when you were struggling with this?
Well, I talked to friends, but I didn't really find that very useful. They said, "Oh, well, he's just typical man." It's like, yes, but and in doing my research about Asperger's, I've learned that there's actually increasing psychological evidence for extreme male brain theory of autism. So you could say that autism is just extreme maleness.
Okay.
And the partners of Asperger's are often hyper empaths, so extreme females, so extreme female traits. And so they go really well together, hyper empaths and Asperger's. They kind of complement each other. So yeah, I started to do more research into Asperger's, and started to look for some online support groups where I could kind of vent and just hear other people's experiences and compare them to what I was going through. And basically things started getting difficult for my husband at work. He couldn't cope with work and then the busyness of life at home with 2 young children. And so he was getting distracted at work, and he wasn't following through and making careless mistakes, and this was leading to kind of multiple disciplinaries. And yeah, I really needed to do something to support my family, really, and to support my husband.
And support you.
Well, yeah.
Because that's really important. You know, we can't support anybody else unless we're in it. We take care of ourselves first. But I imagine trying to juggle all that it can take quite a toll on you. And so I think supporting yourself and finding a place where you get support, and any partner in that situation or family member, I think that's really, really important, because you can't support others unless you're okay yourself. And I get the sense that at times it is very testing for you.
Yeah, definitely.
And I wonder whether those support groups, getting that, it makes sense of it. You know, if you're with others who are in a similar situation, it makes a bit more sense. I'm not the only one.
Yeah, very much. Yeah, we're kind of shoulder to shoulder, sharing the burden, really. Yeah.
Yeah. And normalizing it in a way that you, in that situation, I mean, there's nothing normally under the sun, but actually feeling that this isn't a person who doesn't care about me, it's a condition that affects their behavior.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And actually acknowledging that and getting that confirmation, in a way, I should imagine that would be really helpful to you and all the others out there who struggle. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess there's something, because I do work with people who have Asperger's. They're on that on that continuum, and they come to me and they say, well, do you understand about it? And well, that's not important for me. What's important for me is to understand how it affects your life or your partner's life or your relationship, because that's the important bit, isn't it? You know, nothing is, you get that label and then well, yes, but how does it affect you? That's the important part for me. And so I don't feel I have to know every single part about a condition, but understanding what's affecting that person or their relationship. And I guess that's the same for you, that when you talk to others, that everybody's got a different situation, or there's they're a different situation, or, you know, it's affecting their lives differently, but it is that what they need.
Oh, very much, yes, yeah.
Rather than pigeonholing people, because people get pigeonholed, don't they? And there's, oh, well, that's your problem, and then you get treated in a particular way. Well, that doesn't always help that person. So at what point did you take back control, and how did you do it?
Well, with my husband getting multiple disciplinaries at work, I was really worried about the prospect of him losing his job.
Yeah.
So I had a 3-year-old and a newborn baby, so I wasn't in a position to go back to work. And he was about as useful as a chocolate teapot at home, and he was very depressed. So I actually gave him an ultimatum. I said, right, go and get assessed for autism, otherwise I'm leaving you. There's a kind of phrase, is he AS or is he an arse? So yeah, so because there's quite a fine line, as he was saying, about is the behaviour to do with the condition, or is he just like not, does he just not care?
Yes.
So yeah, he was diagnosed in April 2017. Really easy process, actually, here in Oxford. And yeah, I mean, I just hoped and prayed that he would get a diagnosis, because it was the only way to explain his behaviour. So I was really pleased that he did get a diagnosis, and it also protects him at work. So he's got it on his HR file. So basically, if they try to sack him or make him redundant because of things that have come up because of his Asperger's, then they cannot do that, because it's basically against disciplinary act or whatever.
Yeah.
So he's now at work. So we just pootled on for about another year, but then I hit rock bottom. Nothing had diagnosis, but I realised that he was incapable of changing. That was how his brain was wired, and he couldn't change who he was and how he was. So there I was with 2 young children, a very depressed husband. And I just thought, this is ridiculous. I'm just giving. I need to focus on myself. I'd actually trained in hypnobirthing, and I learned a lot of self-care and relaxation techniques. And so I was busy teaching that to other people. And I was thinking, I've got to practice what I preach here. And so I took back control of my life, and I started to refill my cup through doing self-care and relaxation, and just focusing on myself, really.
So important, because as you said, your cup was completely empty. So refilling your cup is so important, and that's where the analogy of the metaphor of the teapot comes in. I think that's
exactly yes. Yeah.
It's a really good, and it would appeal to the British, wouldn't it? Because you know we do love our cup of tea.
Oh yes.
So yeah, I'm sure that's really relevant to a lot of us Brits. So that sounds good. So you do a lot of self-care, as you say, with relaxation and coping with it yourself. And I think that acknowledgement that he's not going to change, that's his condition, and therefore that's it. As I say, that the only one person who can change is ourselves. So that's important to recognise that we have no control over anyone else, do we? Have their thoughts, words, actions, whether they have a condition or not. That's it. The only person we have control over is ourselves. So yeah, really. What have you learnt so far on your journey?
That I've got to put myself first. That's my main takeaway, and that's what I say to everyone who comes to the Teapot, I mean, it's the same in any codependent relationship, whether your partner's an addict, a workaholic, has a disability or a chronic illness. You just can't give all the time. It's not sustainable. You've got to draw a line and put boundaries in place. I've learned how to say no, and I've learned to focus on myself and my emotional and physical well-being. I've also had to do a lot of letting go of expectations. And I've also had to grieve for the loss of a marriage, relationship that I'm never going to have. So I think, like at the beginning of our marriage, even though it was suggested that my husband had Asperger's, I thought, oh, that's okay. We all got on okay, and but yeah, I never expected things to get as bad as they did, and so it's really letting go of all those expectations that you have of what your ideal relationship is like. It's not always rosy. You do have to work at relationships, and we mentioned before about reacting. I've really had to change how I react to my husband's behaviours, and really change my mindset about things. So that's why I'm a mindset and self-care coach, because I know that it's mindset and self-care that is really, really important in successfully living in a neurodiverse relationship.
Yes, I think that's really interesting. And I think the analogy that I use when I talk to my clients, and I use the analogy of when you're on a plane and you receive the safety instructions, and I say to someone, have you flown? Yeah. Do you remember what they are told when you're taken through the safety instructions? Well, sort of. Okay. What do they tell you about the oxygen mask? Yeah. And if they remember, it will be, oh yeah, put it on me first. So why do they say that? Why do you think that is? And you see people are so vague about it. They have probably not listened to the instructions, and they have no concept of what that's about. So, okay, so if you put that mask on somebody else first, where would your oxygen come from? Oh, okay. Yeah, well, I need to put it on myself first then before I could help anyone else. And that's what you need to do in life. That's the self-care. But it's fascinating that people don't really appreciate that they need to have themselves in a good place before they can help anybody else at all. And then another question I ask is, who's the most important? Who comes first in your life? Priority. They run through a whole list of people, even down to the cat, the dog, the hamster, everybody else. Where do you come? Well, I don't. So if you don't put yourself in there, if you don't put yourself at the top of the list, how on earth can you cope and look after anybody else? And it's amazing how often people don't have that perception. I'm sure you come across it too.
Oh yes, yeah. Well, I've been there myself. Yeah.
I think that's it, isn't it? Mums especially.
Yeah.
The kids have to come first. Actually, no, we have to come first. And that is really important. I just think you've explained so much today, Amy, and you've shared so much. Is there anything else that you want to share that I haven't asked you or we haven't covered so far?
No, I think we've covered everything that I wanted to talk about. I was just going to say, if what I've been talking about resonates with anyone listening, and feels that they're in a similar situation or suspects that their partner has Asperger's, then I'd love you to take a look at my website, which is www.refillingyourcup.com, and you can access the Facebook group from the website. We have meetups in the Oxford area. I've got a retreat day coming up in Oxfordshire, and I offer coaching sessions, and I'd just love to talk with you and support you in refilling your cup.
Oh, that's really great. And you've got some amazing things going on that are supporting partners of those with Asperger's. So that's great. And all the details will be in the show notes. So if you haven't picked up on all of these, you can find them in the show notes. Thank you so much, Amy. I've really enjoyed talking to you today. It's been really informative and helpful. And I really hope that it helps those in a similar situation. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Wendy, for having me on. It's been really great to talk about my journey and how I can help other people.
Great. Thank you. So you can find all the information about this show in the show notes. And you can find lots more on my website, www.yourrelationshipspecialist.co.uk, including the link to my podcasts, and you can also sign up on my newsletter, which has lots more tips and offers. So until next time, bye for now.